Last weekend, after a friend's party, I'd been walking home. Of course, most people would find the city creepy at night, while the breeze blew signs around, making them creak on their hinges. I passed under a flag that blew eerily in the wind, but I knew this city well, very well. Not only do I have a knife in my hoodie pocket, but I find myself fast and strong, so I'm not easily scared. As such, I didn't think much of it. When I passed by a street lamp and peered down the alleyway of one of the streets my friends and I often ran around in, I simply gave it a quick glance and caught sight of a figure in the back. Probably looking through the dumpster, looking for scraps or something. I didn't see the person's face. However, I didn't miss the cracking sounds as the figure's head suddenly turned to the side, almost like an owl. I jerked back slightly. Shock and amusement lighting my face. I guess that was an unusual reaction for a teenager to have after seeing a strange figure in an alleyway. But I guess I'm weird in general. Damn, the crackheads around here are weird, I said to myself anyway. I laughed at the thought and continued down the sidewalk, boots clomping against the cement in a small rhythm. I was looking forward to having the house to myself again. This week, my mother was working more and more these days, leaving me with plenty of free time in the house. It's nighttime. Everything around me had started off warm, while I was slowly floating through the dark, fuzzy world of dreams. You know, that peaceful feeling where you know you're asleep and you simply feel like drifting along restfully. Everything is at peace, and you're perfectly comfortable. Brief, fuzzy images pass through your head on occasions, accompanied by the heartwarming or strangest scenes like small little movie clips. I don't marvel at the drifting images for long, because I'm suddenly being woken from my slumber. It dragged me out slowly, and by the time my eyes are open, I'm already sitting up in my bed. I blink a few times. My eyes already adjusted perfectly to the dark from sleeping. I sit there for a moment, wondering what had woken me, and I'm just about to lay back down to curl up in my soft sheets, but just before I can, a sound catches my attention, and I quirk a pierced eyebrow. It didn't sound too loud, so it had to be downstairs. Cats were probably getting into something. Stupid animals. I hated it when the cats woke me up. Rolling my eyes irritably, I let myself fall back against my mattress, which bounces slightly beneath me. My pillow felt cool against my cheek, and I slipped my arm underneath it, ready to sleep. Ready to let sleep find me once more. The sound doesn't stop, and instead of continuing in an irregular pattern, it continues in a strangely predictable way. I began listening to it, timing it in my head. After a few seconds, I began to be able to tell when the sound was about to happen. What the fuck? I sat up again, thin cotton sheets slithering off my arms with the motion. I keep one hand on the bed next to me, while the other travels to the knife on my bedside table. My fingers find its handle, and I wrap my hand around it. I was probably just overreacting, but still, better safe than sorry. I'm trying to think of possible conclusions as to what was making that weird cracking sound, when all of a sudden I realize it's getting closer. I grip the knife in my hand tighter. It was definitely coming closer and closer, almost like it was walking down the hallway. Walking down the hallway. Walking. That single word seemed to kick a new sound into my head, and as if on cue, the slow sound of footsteps began drawing down my hall, leading towards my room. By now, I had no doubt in my mind there was someone in my house. I can feel a gross tingling crawling up the back of my neck as my hair stood on end. My vision went sharp as my heart shot a burst of adrenaline through my body. I'm frozen in place like a marble statue, not daring to breathe, but I can see my sides moving on their own accord. My heartbeat is slow and loud, and I can feel every pulse reverberate through my body. If it grew any louder, I was afraid the person down the hall would hear it. I was willing my body to move. As I tried to sort my thoughts out through the hazy fog in my mind, what do? Run, hide, stay, and ambush my invader? I leap out of bed, and just as I do, I see the shadows of feet fall out front of my door. The crack that flooded a small amount of light into my room now had two little patches of shadow covering it. I lean against my bed frame. The door creaks open, and I freeze again, my breath hitching in my throat as my lungs suddenly decide to take a strike. For a moment, I'm sure that my heart was going to follow their lead, but my blood continues to slowly pulse through my body as a cold sweat comes over me. Hinges groan slightly as the door opens all the way, and a figure stands in the doorway. My mouth doesn't work. I'm trying to scream, to call out and cry for help, but I can't get the words out. I'm paralyzed. I shouldn't have been able to think so deeply, but the figure in my doorway triggered something in my memory. Walking home, the alley, the dumpster, the crackhead at the dumpster. The outfit he'd been wearing was the same as the figure who was standing before me now. Our dark blue hood was pulled up over his head, but his pale, grayish skin glows eerily from the light of the moon that fell in through my window. His eyes are covered by orange-lensed goggles. His khaki-colored vest was sprayed with blood. This sent another electrical shiver up my spine. I narrowed my eyes, not sure what I should do. My mind kept screaming at me to move, but I just couldn't. My limbs would not comply with my brain's demands. No, was all I could say. All I could say. And once again my mouth glued itself shut and refused to open. The figure was male. His face was hidden in almost all aspect. Goggles over his eyes, hood over his forehead, and some strange mouth block over his mouth and chin. He came forward, lurching slightly. His arm twitched at his side twice as he stepped agonizingly, slowly towards me. One hand was lifted to his mouth, and he put a finger over his lips. Shh. I backed up against my bed, pressing my spine against the wooden bedpost. I was clutching the knife in my hand, so tightly that my knuckles were turning white. My gaze suddenly drifted down to the object in the boy's hand. I could feel my pupils dilate in fear, as I saw his weapon much outclassed mine, and by the slight blood dripping off its blade, I say I had more experience too. The intruder held an axe in his hand. Blood was trickling off it and splashing into the ground below. I could move, and my grip on the knife was suddenly loosening. Before I knew it, the knife was falling from my grip and clattering against the hardwood floor. I gasped as the sound reached my ears. No. Said the figure again, as he continued his journey to me across the room. After his foot met the floor again, his neck cracked to the side on an inhuman angle. I could hear his bones crackling against his tendons, and the sound sent a sense of doom through me. I wasn't going to get away. I wasn't going to move. I was going to wait. And this thing was going to have its way with me. My heart was thunder in my chest, crashing against my ribcage, and my vision suddenly blurred from my lack of oxygen intake, but my lungs still refused to accept air. The figure's head was now on a 50-degree angle from normal, and he twitched occasionally as he strolled over to me, pace never quickening. Another step, its neck cracked the other way and to the side, bones making the familiar, eerie sound. "Shh," he said once more, and more step. And one more step would take him to the spot only a foot away from me. He took it. The hand with the axe was raising slightly. My vision was spinning. My body felt heavy. I could feel my knees shaking. Hell, I could feel my entire being shaking. The axe came towards me, slowly, and I felt it resting against my stomach, the blade simply sitting there. I fell forwards, unable to support myself any longer, and I felt a hand on my shoulder, holding me up only slightly, and only long enough for the blunt blade to be crammed through my PJ top and pierce through my stomach. Instant agony took over. My body once again seized up and went rigid with a combination of shock, terror, and fear. The stars in my vision went black and white, and my world spun for only a brief second. For the pain overtook me. The last thing I saw were a pair of silver-tipped shoes and a pool of my own blood that was just reaching out for the soles of those shoes. And then my world went black and numb.